Good, thanks, George. Thanks for making some time.
So how do we get here? I'm not sure I understand the backstory. You're doing a paper?
The
Case history, rather?
The backstory is this. I set out to basically just uncover the journeys that various entrepreneurs have taken by interviewing them for a little like YouTube channel that I have got going. And when I was, so I got introduced to Kanwal from another entrepreneur. His name is Dheeraj Pandey, who founded a company called Nutanix. And so basically got introduced to Kanwal. So I interviewed Kanwal, and then I realized there was more than what meets the eye with the way he talked about Excelan. And so I was like, well, this needs to kind of be covered. And I just kind of, for fun, wrote up like what I thought he said to me in the interview. And then it kind of led to involving my Berkeley professor. And then it involved Conwell introducing all you guys. And so I think what we're actually doing is making this an actual case study over the last, over the last 6 months, I'd say. But yes, we're making this a case study that Berkeley is going to put its stamp on and then distribute via the Harvard Business Network. And then I'm going to do this for a few more, entrepreneurs and successful and maybe even unsuccessful stories.
Yeah, it wouldn't be all that realistic without some of the flops.
Yeah, exactly.
You get like 9 out of 10 startups are flops.
99 out of 100, but yeah, exactly.
Oh, worse than I thought. Yeah, I consider myself extremely lucky in that I have been in early on 2 startups that turned out well. What are the odds?
Nice. So yeah, that's where it happens. And so the vision I had for this whole initiative that I'm working on is, when I was studying my MBA over at Berkeley in the late 2000s, about 12 years ago, I realized that I wasn't able to learn a lot from the case studies that we were working on about entrepreneurship or anything. I was overqualified to run a 1920 steel mill, but not really qualified to be an entrepreneur and learn about pricing and go to market and engineering and all these decisions and things like that. So hopefully this can be digested by MBA students as well, or business people, or just generally people. So yeah, that's the context. And so vision is to kind of create a multimedia kind of like flavor, as opposed to just like looking at a 20-page PDF case study, which I personally was unable to digest. I thought, well, let me make something that I personally can digest. At least I should be able to digest what I'm making, and if I can, then hopefully others can, at least. So I would like this to be like, there'd be some text, maybe some problem, and then there's a video, and it could be more than one person on the video, and then more text, maybe another problem or a challenge, and then there's another video or 2. And so I want to try and capture snippets of insights and actions and how problems are solved and things like that from the team, and then supplement and use it to supplement text. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds interesting. So you think I'll get to see it someday when you're done?
The idea is to publish this, right? So for sure.
Wow, I'm sure I'll learn a lot, especially considering, wow, this stuff happened like almost 20 years ago. 40 years ago.
Yeah, I was born in 1979, so I was 2 years old. 3 years old.
Wow, I graduated college that year.
So yeah, so I have the record button on, if it's okay. So let me, have you seen the Word document that I wrote up? Like, it was a very initial draft by any chance?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So maybe you can just tell me what was your role in the beginning, or throughout the whole time you were there, what was your role?
Okay. Yeah, narrative form. I came in at Excelan because of my connection with Zilog. I knew some of the folks there working together at Zilog Systems Division. And Dale Way was in marketing. I worked in technical marketing at the time at Zilog. And Dale Way called me up at some point and asked me, this is in '83, I think, would I be interested in coming over to Excelan, because I worked together with him. And they were looking for some more technical, like sales support and marketing support at Excelan. And it didn't take me very long to decide. It sounded very interesting. I was impressed with what they had created in the first intelligent Ethernet controller board that could offload protocol processing from what would be like desktop minis at the time, high-end workstations. They had a product to go into that sort of thing. That market was just taking off, the idea of like Unix-based desktop computers in the early 80s. And local area networking was just taking off at the time too. And so it seemed to me to fit well with some of my experience at Zilog. Zilog was in the systems division, a pioneer in distributed systems and the adaptation of Unix to desktop computers, or at least small group computers, I'd say would be more accurate at the time. So yeah, I came over there and started working on just what I said, talking with customers, explaining how to integrate the product. I'd go along with the sales guys on calls and support them and be in touch, doing some documentation work and a little bit of software development later on. Okay, how are we doing? Are we covering the right stuff here?
Yeah, this is great. No, just keep going. I'll ask you questions. So, so I want to get to some of those points. You mentioned we were offering, Excelan was offering a Ethernet control port that could offer multi-protocol processing. So it kind of like was uniting multiple protocols into kind of, so maybe can you just explain the product? There was a hardware component, there was a software component. If you could just explain the product one more time, that'd be helpful.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So there were many systems companies starting up at the time and assembling out of available microprocessor components and stuff that had come out of the microcomputer market into what would be low-end mini computer replacements or desktop workstation products at the time. So at the same time, Unix was gathering in popularity as a new solution for people doing small systems support in their business, professional computers or just accounting computers, whatever. There was a real wave of change happening in the industry that you kind of take for granted now. But so it was a very lively place with all these companies, and they were looking for a way to add network connectivity to their systems. The internet was also brand new for most people. It was only known in academia. And so local area systems had just been worked out with technology from Xerox PARC, and Ethernet had been announced just recently as what would be a high-end local network communication standard at the time. And so Excelan was taking advantage of the expertise of some of the people who founded it to put together a product that would fit right into that emerging market. And by adding this controller board, which had a 16-bit CPU on it, they could add full network integration without a lot of development work on their systems. We just add a driver and build some apps for whatever version of Unix they were running on their computer. Plug in the board and download our own protocol software onto the board, and they would have a good performing connection to other systems over internet protocols. And that might be just local. For instance, they may have things like DEC computers that were running the Berkeley distribution of software in a technical environment. And its local networking was TCP/IP based. So by using our product, these vendors could easily become connected and check off that requirement, because people buying systems were pretty interested in connectivity by then and using standards-based networking.
Got it. Got it.
Hopefully that explained what you're asking. Like,
Yeah. So there was a board, and then there was software. So the board was installed on each node in the network, and then the software was there to accompany, I guess, with the board based on the version of Unix on that node.
Yeah. So the board plugged right into the computer.
The computer, what I'm calling a node, I guess.
Systems developer was doing, right?
Right.
And I don't even remember the names of most of the people, most of these companies that we were integrating with, because most of them didn't make it. I know some of the big names that we talked to at the time. For instance, we probably talked to Sun, but they had their own thing going. I don't think that we offered that much value to Sun, because they had a lot of talent already there to develop this stuff. But that's the kind of company we were talking to. Or Cisco, remember those guys? I think we talked to them about integrating our board with their early communications products. Like, at the time, it wasn't clear what Cisco was going to be. And one of their products that we could have fit into would be like a terminal concentrator, if I remember right. Just connecting a bunch of async ports into a network, so they could run terminal sessions to mini computers. And, I remember these big names, and they did become a huge market opportunity for Excelan, but they're demonstrative of the sort of thing that was happening. Or at one point, we integrated our product with a Next cube. Remember Next? They had this magnesium cube of a system, like 1 foot cubicle or roughly that. And we brought one of those into our lab, and I worked on the driver adaptation so that our Ethernet board would add TCP/IP communications to the Next cube. And so on. So yeah, the product was a board. There was software that ran on the board with protocols implemented on it. And then there'd be some driver and apps that you would adapt to their version of Unix, typically. My monitor gave up on me. Actually, to be precise.
It's still fine. I can still see you okay.
Good. My screen went dark. This computer has a very strict timeout policy. I'll touch something for 10 minutes. I'm back to the lock screen.
Okay. So one of the things I want to touch on, so you had mentioned you were doing some documentation work, technical product marketing, and then later on, I'm sure you were doing everything, like you said, talking to customers, integrating the product. I wanted to touch on the customer angle and the documentation work, because from what I understood from Kunwal was that, the way that you all were going to customers was, Kunwal mentioned he ran glossy ads. Someone, they picked up the phone. Hey, this is what we got. We'll ship it to you. If you don't like it, no questions asked, money back, or we'll send someone to you. So it was kind of like people had to be self-sufficient because there was limited feet on the ground, at least out of the box. So maybe talk about like the work that you had to put in to, making sure that the inertia was low for a customer that just received something in the mail, a FedEx package with a board, and okay, now what do I do, right? Where's the README? And you had to so basically make all that stuff. So maybe if you could throw some light on that.
Okay, so we had a couple of sales guys, and I shared a room with them in the early days at Excelan, and they did all the customer early contact stuff. So I don't have a hell of a lot of insight in that, but at some point they'd have the customer's attention enough to go do a visit. So I might go and sit in on a sales call, and they'd have technical people involved besides the managing people at the customer, and I'd back up these sales guys with technical information, details as required. Then if things move forward, there'd be further follow-up calls with customer engineers about the integration, and we'd help to varying degrees. Like some people would take it all the way just from our docs. Other people I'd be in touch with and straightening out particulars, problems of integration, maybe if they misapprehended how it was meant to work. So I don't know if I hit that question quite right from your point of view. I didn't have a hell of a lot of insight into what the marketing looked like at customer contact, initial contact.
Right.
But of course, there was no internet. No way.
Yeah. When you were,
it was all phone calls and paper mail, I guess.
Yeah, and so when were you involved sometimes with customers and integrating the product?
Yeah, to varying degrees. Like I did actually do driver development and testing for the next cube. That was a point of pretty deep immersion.
Right.
Other ones, it would just be some questions to me.
And were there ever any situations where the product failed, to integrate, or there was such a huge challenge on the customer side because they didn't understand it, or they didn't implement it the right way, or something like that?
Not that I remember. There were probably cases that I didn't know about where the customer went a little ways and went in a different direction, and sales would have known about it, but not me. If a customer had a problem with the product, it might be that they could do the job cheaper themselves because they might have had the engineering skills required to do this work without buying our product. Now, our product was offering easy integration, and you're paying to offload the processing of protocols from the host.
Right.
But if somebody is really cost focused, like adding this to a Macintosh, it wouldn't be that, right? Like Apple did their own TCP/IP, it ran on their host processor, very cost conscious. So I don't think we ever had any real entree to Apple that way, for example. It would depend. And depending on the situation, it could be a benefit to use offloaded protocol processing. Or in other cases, if the host computer had a really fast processor to begin with, you could get better performance without the offloading of protocols. Oddly, the same thing still seems to pertain. Companies still strike a balance between offloading internet protocol processing and doing it right on the host CPUs.
Right. So I have a bit of a rudimentary question. You might laugh, but remember the Polycom conference phone we would have in the conference room, right? Where it picks up everyone's voices. You have a speakerphone. I'm just very curious. In the 80s, early 80s, I couldn't imagine there was an elaborate speakerphone setup. Speakerphones weren't around. How were you doing group calls? How were you doing calls where there were multiple people on the line? Was there a bridge? Was it conference bridges, or was it in person? I'm just very curious.
Well, as I recall, we had some sort of Polycom or Polycom-like devices even in the early mid 80s.
Got it.
But sometimes we just do that. Yeah.
Okay, and whether, but you had to be physically on the ear to the phone, or were there speaker phones in the conference
But we
room?
might be in a conference room gathered around a speakerphone.
Oh, wow.
With
Okay.
varying degrees of sophistication, right?
Right,
Yeah, I
right,
mean, the
right.
state of the art was improving rapidly in the 80s with these devices.
Like I said, it was a very rudimentary question. It was more for personal curiosity. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay, I actually, for the first time, actually understood what the product was, so that was good. This has been useful from that perspective. So I'm going to capture the way you talked about the product as part of this whole case study. That'll be very useful.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think that's all I have right now, George.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good. And I believe you're putting together a group call or a group
Yes,
meeting.
I'm trying for that on Tuesday next week at 12 p.m. It's 95% set. Just trying to get the Berkeley professor onboarded fully, as opposed to like being there for only half an hour, 1 hour. So he's just trying to move something around. So I'll know that pretty soon, hopefully.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Well, nice talking with you.
Yeah, and we'll talk to you again on
Project.
Tuesday, hopefully. Yeah, if you can
Give
make
my
it.
regards to my old Excelan cohort when you see them again.
I will. I'll tell them we talked.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.